My name is Sarah Hill, and by all accounts, my life is perfectly ordinary. I'm 34 years old, single, and live in a small town just outside of Manchester. I work as a middle school teacher, spending my days trying to inspire kids to care about science and the environment. It's fulfilling, in its own way. But lately I've been feeling disconnected. Like there's something I'm supposed to be doing, but I can't quite figure out what. My life is predictable, work, home, maybe dinner with friends on the weekend. I'm not someone who seeks attention or takes risks. I've always preferred to stay in the background, quietly doing what I can to make a difference. But let's face it, how much of a difference can one person really make? That's the question that keeps me up at night. I've always been passionate about the environment, the state of the world, the rising temperatures, the dying. Forests, the oceans choked with plastic, fills me with a kind of quiet despair. I do what I can. Recycle, volunteer for cleanups, teach my students about sustainability. But it's hard not to feel like my efforts are just a drop in an endless ocean of problems. That feeling of helplessness has started to creep into other parts of my life. I've become cynical, withdrawn. Sometimes I wonder if humanity is even worth saving. We seem so determined to destroy ourselves, driven by greed and division. I used to believe in the goodness of people, but that belief feels more like wishful thinking these days. It was on one of those particularly cynical days, while driving home from work, that everything changed. The sky was overcast, the roads slick with rain. I remember gripping the wheel tightly, my mind racing with thoughts about the news I'd just heard on the radio. Another report about corporate corruption, another story about wildfires devastating communities. I barely noticed the truck until it was too late. It came barreling toward me from the opposite direction, skidding out of control on the wet pavement. I slammed on the brakes, but the impact was inevitable. My car spun, metal crunching, glass shattering. And then, silence. Or rather, something beyond silence. A stillness so profound that it felt like the world itself had stopped. I opened my eyes, but I wasn't in my car anymore. The first thing I noticed was the light. It wasn't blinding, like the cliches you hear about, but soft and golden, radiating warmth. I was standing in a vast expanse, a place that seemed both infinite and intimate. The ground beneath my feet wasn't solid. It shimmered like sunlight on water, and the air felt alive, pulsing with a quiet hum. I looked around, disoriented, my heart pounding. Was I dead? The thought hit me like a thunderbolt. The crash. There was no way I could have survived that. Panic gripped me, but before I could spiral further, a voice broke through the stillness. Sarah. It was calm, regal, yet deeply familiar. I turned toward the sound and froze. Sitting on an ornate throne, adorned with intricate designs that seemed to shift and glow, was Queen Elizabeth II. Not as I'd seen her in photos or on TV, frail and elderly, but radiant, timeless, and commanding. Her presence filled the space, and yet there was a softness to her gaze that put me at ease. I stumbled backward, struggling to find my words. What? Am I dreaming? The Queen smiled faintly. Not quite. I stared at her, my mind racing. But you're dead. As are you, at least for the moment, she said, her tone matter of fact. Though your journey here is temporary. I couldn't process what I was hearing. None of this made sense. Why am I here? Why you? She rose from the throne, her movements fluid, almost otherworldly. You've been brought here because there's something you must see, something you must understand. Before I could respond, the space around us shifted. The golden glow dimmed, replaced by a cold, harsh light. Images began to appear in the air, scenes of Earth, but not as I had known it. Forests reduced to ash, oceans rising, swallowing cities. People divided, fighting over dwindling resources. The chaos and destruction were overwhelming. "This is the path humanity is on," the Queen said, her voice steady. "A path of greed, division, and disregard for the world we've been entrusted to protect." I turned to her, my chest tight with emotion. "But why are you showing me this? What can I do?" The Queen's gaze bore into mine, unyielding, yet compassionate. "Because, Sarah, you've been given a chance to make a difference. You've always felt it, haven't you? That pull, that sense that you're meant for something greater." I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. "But I'm just one person. How can I possibly change anything?" She stepped closer, her presence almost overwhelming. "Change doesn't come from power or influence alone. It comes from people like you, those who care enough to try, even when it seems hopeless. That is the greatest power of all." The images faded, and the golden light returned, softer now, more intimate. The Queen's expression softened. "Your time here is short, Sarah, but you must return with a purpose. Humanity's future depends on it." Before I could ask more, the light intensified, and everything dissolved into nothingness. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the golden expanse or surrounded by the calming presence of the Queen. Instead, I found myself in a dark, shadowed place. It wasn't the complete void I'd expected. It felt alive, throbbing with an oppressive energy that made my skin crawl. The air was heavy, thick with despair, and the faint sound of weeping and whispers echoed all around me. My breath quickened, and I turned in every direction, searching for something familiar, something to anchor me. Instead, I saw shadows shifting in the distance. They were human-shaped, yet distorted, faces blurred, their features twisted with anguish. A cold chill ran down my spine as one of them stepped forward, its hollow eyes fixed on me. "Do you see?" a voice said suddenly, breaking through the oppressive silence. It was the Queen's voice, though I couldn't see her. "This is what humanity creates when it forgets its purpose, when it allows greed and hatred to consume it." The shadowed figure pointed behind me, and I turned to see a horrifying scene unfolding. It was as if I were looking through a window into another world. On the other side, I saw people in suits, seated at long, ornate tables, signing papers with cold precision. Their expressions were devoid of emotion as factories in the distance spewed black smoke into the sky. The ground beneath them cracked, revealing rivers of molten fire. Yet, they seemed oblivious. "This is the consequence of unchecked greed," the Queen's voice continued. "Those who seek power at the expense of others, who view the earth as a resource to be exploited rather than a home to be nurtured." I wanted to look away, but my feet were rooted in place. The scene shifted again, and now I saw crowds of people, separated by walls of hatred and fear. Their faces were contorted with rage as they shouted at one another, their words tearing at the air like claws. In the distance, I could see the earth itself beginning to wither, its once vibrant greens and blues fading into dull, lifeless hues. "Why are you showing me this?" I shouted into the darkness, my voice breaking. "What can I do to stop it?" A soft light appeared in the distance, cutting through the shadows. The Queen stepped forward, her presence calming the storm of despair around me. "Because, Sarah, humanity's future is not set in stone. It is shaped by the choices of those who dare to care." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "But I'm just one person. How can I possibly change something so big?" The Queen's gaze was steady, unwavering. "You're right. You cannot do it alone. But you can inspire others. Every ripple begins with a single drop." She gestured toward another scene that appeared before me. This one was different, brighter, filled with hope. I saw communities coming together, planting trees in once barren lands. I saw people helping each other, bridging divides with compassion and understanding. I saw children laughing, playing in a world that was healing. "This is what's possible," she said. "But it requires courage, perseverance, and the belief that even the smallest actions can make a difference." The shadows around us began to dissolve, replaced by the soft glow of golden light. The Queen stepped closer, her expression softer now, almost maternal. "You've always felt like you were meant for something greater, Sarah. That feeling is not an accident. You were chosen for this moment, for this mission." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "But what if I fail?" Her smile was gentle but firm. "Failure is part of the journey. What matters is that you try." Before I could say more, the light around us began to intensify, and the world started to shift again. The Queen's voice was the last thing I heard before everything faded. "Go, Sarah. Be the change." When I awoke, it felt as if I'd been underwater, gasping for air. My chest heaved, and I blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I was back in my car, or what was left of it. The shattered windshield glinted in the sunlight, and the twisted metal groaned as I shifted slightly. Pain shot through my body, but I was alive. "Help is on the way," a voice called out. I turned my head to see a man in a reflective vest crouched beside the wreckage. His face was filled with concern. "Just hang on. You're going to be okay." I nodded weakly, though the memory of what I'd just experienced consumed me. The golden light, the Queen's voice, the visions of despair and hope. It all felt so vivid, so real. I wasn't sure if it had been a dream or something more, but one thing was certain. I couldn't ignore it. In the weeks that followed, as I recovered from the accident, the memories of that otherworldly encounter stayed with me. I replayed the Queen's words over and over in my mind. "You were chosen for this moment, for this mission." But what mission? I was just a teacher, one person in a world that often felt too big, too chaotic to change. The doubts crept in, threatening to drown the fragile hope that had taken root in my heart. Yet, every time I felt myself slipping into despair, I remembered the vision of the brighter future, the communities coming together, the laughter of children. It was a reminder that change was possible, but it had to start somewhere. I began small. I started organizing local cleanups, rallying my students and their families to join me. I gave lessons not just on science, but on the importance of kindness, compassion, and the interconnectedness of all life. At first, the response was slow. Only a handful of people showed up to the first cleanup. But I kept going. The Queen's words echoed in my mind. Every ripple begins with a single drop. Soon, the ripple began to grow. More people joined the cleanups. A neighbor started a community garden. A local business offered to sponsor recycling bins for the school. Slowly but surely, I saw the seeds of change taking root. And with each small victory, I felt the hope within me grow stronger. The visions of despair no longer haunted me the way they had before. Instead, they served as a reminder of what was at stake and why this mission mattered. I didn't have all the answers, but I didn't need them. All I needed was the courage to keep going. Months had passed since the accident, and my life had transformed in ways I never thought possible. What started as small local efforts had blossomed into something far larger. The cleanup groups had grown into a community initiative, and people from neighboring towns began to take notice. News of our efforts spread, and suddenly I found myself speaking at local events, sharing my story. Not just about the accident, but about the vision I'd seen during my near-death experience. At first, I was hesitant to share the part about meeting the Queen. It felt too surreal, too unbelievable. But as I saw the impact of my words, the way people leaned in, their eyes filled with curiosity and hope, I realized that the truth, no matter how extraordinary, had power. It wasn't just an accident, I told a group at one of my talks. It was a wake-up call. I saw what could happen if we continue down this path, if we let greed and division consume us. But I also saw something else. A future where we come together, where we rebuild, where we heal. That future is possible, but only if we choose it. The response was overwhelming. People came up to me afterward, sharing their own fears about the state of the world, their desire to make a difference, but not knowing where to start. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a purpose, a way to guide others toward the hope I had been shown. The initiatives expanded. We organized tree planting events, started workshops on sustainability, and launched educational programs in local schools. But it wasn't just about the environment. The heart of our mission became about connection, helping people see that their actions, no matter how small, mattered, that we were all part of something bigger. One evening, as I was reviewing plans for an upcoming event, I received an email from a journalist. They had heard about my story and wanted to feature it in a national publication. My first instinct was to say no. The thought of sharing my experience on such a large platform terrified me. But then I remembered the Queen's words, "You were chosen for this moment, for this mission." I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes." The article was published a few weeks later, and the response was beyond anything I could have imagined. People from all over the country reached out, inspired by the story, eager to start their own initiatives. What had once felt like an impossible task now felt within reach, not because of me alone, but because of the ripple effect I had started. But amidst the success, I never forgot the warning I had seen during my near-death experience. The images of destruction and despair still lingered at the edges of my mind, a constant reminder of what was at stake. The Queen's voice echoed in my heart. Change doesn't come from power or influence alone. It comes from people like you. And so, I pressed on, determined to keep the ripple growing. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that has happened, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the second chance I was given, but for the clarity it brought to my life. The accident, the near-death experience, the conversation with the Queen. It all feels like a lifetime ago, yet the lessons I learned remain as vivid as ever. I've come to understand that the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make every day, choices to care, to connect, to try. And while the problems we face as a society can feel overwhelming, I've seen firsthand the power of collective action. One person's efforts can spark a movement, and that movement can change the world. The vision of the Queen stays with me, her words a constant guide. She reminded me that even the smallest actions matter, that every ripple begins with a single drop. I've taken those words to heart, and I've watched as the ripples I created have grown into waves of change. People often ask me if I think the vision I saw was real, if I truly believe I met the Queen in the afterlife. My answer is always the same: it doesn't matter. What matters is what I've done with the message I was given. What matters is the hope it's inspired in others. The world is still far from perfect. There's so much work to be done, so many battles to fight. But I believe in the possibility of a brighter future, a future where we come together, where we rebuild, where we heal. And I believe it's a future worth fighting for. As I close my eyes, I can almost hear the Queen's voice again. Be the change, and so I will.